A funny note on that. I started TikTok recently just to see if it would do anything or what all the hype is about for Whitetail Instinct. And a guy told me I said, we're getting ready for plans for the fall now. Time to make a game plan for the fall. And he commented and said, in what, wait 2 years? Because the buck wasn't big enough. So I had to comment back. Back with episode 6 of the Out Here Show. Another Monday, another Out Here Show. We're talking a little bit of trophy hunting stuff. We're talking early season deer tips and deer research and a bunch of other stuff. So should be a pretty good show. As usual, short intro, but we'll turn it over to Brody with what we're doing. This time of year, we're doing a lot of planning based off our trail camera picture now. Yeah, I think that's the big thing, is just checking these trail cameras, figuring out which places we want to hit first, how our setups are going to work, if we're in the right spot, if we need to move, what all of this data that we've kind of collected since the off-season started means for September 1st when the season opens. Yeah, so it's just a lot of prep, getting ready for opening day and figuring out which spots as we get closer that we want to hit first. We have a pretty good, probably the best early season prospects that we've had in a long time. The early season's always been a struggle for us for whatever reason. It's something that we've gained more knowledge on and tried to learn more, and hopefully that's kind of paying off. I mean, I can think back that we had spots to go to, but I don't know that we've had them surefire is way too strong of a word to use, but as much data and intel and momentum, I think, going into an early season. And knowing that there's bucks there, where exactly they are and kind of where we need to go set up, it's just if the final pieces are going to come together. Yeah. It's closer than we've ever been early season. So should be exciting as we get into deer season here in September. The first thing we're going to talk about, which should bring out lots of strong opinions, which we want you guys to leave below if you have any opinions on anything that we talk about. But we're talking about trophy hunting. This was in the July issue of Bowhunter magazine. They're just talking about trophy hunting and some thoughts on it, and just kind of got me thinking, so I thought it was a good one to kind of bring up and see what you thought and see what we thought and see what everybody else thought. So there's a quote at the start that said, "How can other bow hunters know what is big or small unless animals are scored and entered in the books?" So that was a quote. He was kind of talking about why Boone and Crockett needed to be a thing. And like I said, it's kind of, he thinks, or that guy thought that, how do bow hunters know if they've shot something big if we don't score it and enter it in some sort of record book? Or that just kind of, I had a problem with that statement, so I was going to try and articulate maybe why I had a problem with that statement. Because it got me thinking when I read that. I was like, oh, I don't really like what I just heard there. I kind of had to think through why I didn't like it. I guess I'll give you my first initial reaction real quick and let you go. My first initial reaction was, that's fine. We can score things. I don't know if there's nothing wrong with scoring things. There's record books in sports, like for having the top passing, touchdowns and rushing records and all that. There's nothing wrong with scoring it. I think it's how it's used and perceived. But also, we don't necessarily need a score to tell me that the deer I shot's huge if it's huge to me. Yeah, that's the first thing. To me, I know if a deer is big or if he's small as soon as I see him walking towards me. The other night we were velvet scouting. We seen that one walking across the swamp going to the soybeans, and we're like, shooter, big deer. A funny note on that. I started TikTok recently just to see if it would do anything or what all the hype is about for Whitetail Instinct. And a guy told me I said, we're getting ready for plans for the fall now. Time to make a game plan for the fall. And he commented and said, in what, wait 2 years? Because the buck wasn't big enough. So I had to comment back. So I let him know that was pretty low and that I didn't need him judging me. Yeah. That's a side note for that, but it kind of ties right in with this. TikTok starting off strong. Yeah. That's why we weren't on Ridge Runner. And I feel like there's a Ridge Runner name running around on YouTube saying similar things. So, I guess if you're going to put your name out there and you have an account, that's who it is. You guys want to go check him out. He'll judge you. But so moving on. Like I said, I don't need someone to tell me if it's big or small. If I think, then I just got to go back to that. if that's something we've talked about a bunch of times
It's
already.
a big pet peeve for us.
It's just a social media people telling other people or shaming other people for what they're shooting or what they think is a good deer.
Yeah.
It just should not happen. It happens way too much, and it's just I don't know. It just needs to leave. And I think what we're trying to do is at least speak out on it and speak about it, and hopefully other people that have more followers, more, bigger accounts than we do, hopefully start speaking up on it, and we can tame it down a little bit. Sometimes
stop judging other people. Like, my life and what I shoot has nothing to do with Ridge Runner and what he shoots. If he wants to wait for bigger ones, wait. But don't judge me because I feel like that buck was big, which it was. It's not a 160, I understand that. But it's big enough that I'm excited to shoot him if he walks 15 yards from me in September 1st.
That's a 3.5, 4.5-year-old 4x4 deer. Public, what's
you have to
wrong
judge
with...
if that's Iowa. Yeah, it's probably not a big buck.
Yeah,
but that's Nebraska and a place with a 160 is not walking out on that property no matter how long I wait.
Yeah, and that deer's probably dead by rifle season if we don't get him. So what are you going to do?
Plenty of people will be happy to shoot that thing.
Yeah.
So that's a side note. That was a tangent, but I
got
got
now we're going to get going on. You can see our passion not for the people that do that. Yeah. But anyways, I'll know if a deer's big. He's walking towards me. I don't need you to score him to tell me if he's big or not. And again, I have right down here, I don't need social media or others to tell me if my deer that I think is big or not big. So, I mean, that's not what's going through my mind, when that deer is walking in. Is I wrote down Billy was the name I put in, but now I'm going to change it. Like, man, I hope Ridge Runner from Ohio approves of this deer that I'm going to shoot. Like, that's not what's going through my mind.
And I think the sad part is that sometimes that goes through people's mind. For us, that's not. But for a lot of people and young hunters and people trying to get into it, that's what's going through their mind. Is if I shoot this deer, I want to, but what's this guy going to say on social media? What are my friends going to say? And sometimes that's, going through their mind, that's not a good thing.
So that should be the last thing on your mind when a deer is walking in, is if other people are going to approve. Like, if you think it's fine, shoot it.
Yeah, and I'll know when I see it.
Yeah, that's what we say. Well, are you going to, did you shoot that one? Dad asks us all the time, you going to shoot him? And usually we're like, yes or no, but it's like sometimes I'll just know. If he walks in, and I'll know if I see it when he walks in.
If I'm shaking and I'm like, oh my God, I'm pulling back.
So like you said, that happened. It's way too common. It goes through people's minds, and that shouldn't even be close to what's going through your mind when that buck or doe or whatever is walking in. So second, to me, we touched on it just a little bit before, location, and if it's public or private. Makes a huge difference on if you do want to go off score or whatever, it makes a huge difference on, if it's public land or private land. Different states, different sizes of deer. Are you in Rhode Island? Are you in Texas? Are you in Iowa? That's going to make a huge difference between whether that buck would be considered big or not big for, the overall picture of what people would consider a big deer.
I mean, I hunted in Iowa with the hunting public, and the deer we saw on public land there were completely different. They blew the deer out of the water that I've seen on Nebraska public land. Like, I see those deer on Nebraska public land, but it's few and far between. Where I'm seeing them there, 12, 15 times a year, because it's Iowa. It's a different place than Nebraska, than Michigan, than Pennsylvania, than Texas, like you said. Like, expectations are completely, different for where you're at.
Yeah, and your property versus someone else's just on different sides of the highway 20 miles is going to make a huge difference as to what deer are in the area. Like, where we live, there's probably not that many big deer around, but if you go 20 minutes south where we turkey hunt, there is big deer everywhere. It's going to make a huge difference as to what you consider a big deer on your property to be. So it's all relative. You can't judge anybody in my opinion, you can't judge anybody for anything. It's all different. It's all situational dependent. And the last thing you should worry about, to me, is score. If he makes you happy and he's big, shoot him. And then you want to score him just to see what he scores, fine. I don't have any problem with it. I don't think it's the main thing that you should be concerned about anyways. Yeah. On the flip side, though, I mean, I do see where it adds a challenge. For some guys to shoot a certain sized animal adds that extra challenge to them, that if you want to wait 3 years and target one buck and, and agonize over it and hope he makes it through every year and do all that, but it adds a challenge and you're having fun hunting, I don't have any problem with it. Just don't comment on my TikTok that my buck's not big enough if that's what you do.
And I think that's the difference is we hunt public land and we try to hunt different ones, and it's always different. And the challenge for us is hunting different properties that we don't know. And I think if you have private land, and we don't, this is just kind of an assumption here, You hunt it so much, you know where everything is. The mystery of the property leaves. So then it becomes a chasing deer game as opposed to learning the property and killing a deer game as it is on public land. So I think that's where your mindset switches there, where if you're on private land and you know the property, you're waiting for a deer to get to 160, and that's the challenge. There's nothing wrong with that. That's just a different mindset. You can do that on private land where you can't necessarily do that on public.
Yeah, if you're following the rules and you're hunting and you're enjoying it, I don't care how you do it. If you want to wait for the 160, 180, 200-inch deer to walk by, it's just the problem is where you think everybody else has to do the same thing.
Yeah, and I know there's pieces of public land where we hunt and people we know that are waiting for 160s, and they're never going to be there.
Yeah.
And if they are, they're there one day, and they're passing through, and that's once in 10 years. Like, your expectations, you're waiting for a buck that's never going to show up. So don't have your expectations be to get something so it can score when it's never going to be there.
Yeah, like going back to the story you said earlier, if we were going to wait, apparently, for that buck to get bigger in 2 years, I would guess we've only seen, on the public land we've hunted, we've had either seen or got trail camera pictures on consecutive years on what, maybe a handful of deer?
Yeah.
Less than 10, probably for sure.
Yeah,
that
probably like 5.
that we've seen or got trail camera pictures of or heard someone talk about or know he's
Yeah.
still around.
In more than just one season.
So if we were waiting for deer to continually get bigger, you wouldn't shoot anything.
No.
You'd not even have a chance. You'd just be nature viewing, because it's just the nature of hunting public land in Nebraska on small pieces of public land.
Yep.
So, and the author said it. He goes, he thinks it's fine, but it shouldn't be the sole focus of your hunting. So, which again, I agree with. Couldn't agree more with. He says, the wrong reason to do it is so that you can brag about the score of the deer later on. The right reason for trophy hunting is for enjoying the process, which is pretty much what you said. If you're hunting private land and that's the process you want to work through, our process is going to
Just
new pieces of
getting
public
something
land
on the ground.
and going somewhere new. That's our process. That's what we enjoy. If your process is, waiting to shoot a bigger deer, perfectly fine. But like he said, if you're doing it solely for the reason to brag about the 165, then that's the wrong reason to be doing it, and I couldn't agree more.
And I think we'll preface this by saying everybody wants to shoot the big deer. Everybody wants to shoot the biggest deer. Like, we can't sit here and say that that's not part of it. I can't sit here and say that it's not part of why I get up in October to go hunting is just because I love the process. Like, there is an end result, and the end result is to shoot a deer and to shoot a big deer. But don't let that drive you, and don't let that take away from your experience or take away from shooting an animal you'd be happy to take.
Yeah, and he went on to talk about kind of high fence operations. He didn't understand them. I don't understand them.
I don't either.
Personal preference, I don't get it. He's talked about too, like, what's the challenge? What's the story behind that? He goes, that's pretty much all a bragging right deal. Couldn't agree more with that.
I don't know. You can't say nothing. You can't go, hey, look at that deer on my wall. It looks ridiculous. But I shot it on a high fence, and it defeats the purpose.
And the optics for anti-hunters and non-hunters shooting, like fish in a barrel, shooting deer in a pen, is not good. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So it's just not. He just touched on it quick. I just want to touch on it. Just didn't agree with it. Don't get it, I guess, in the broad sense. So couldn't agree with him more on that. And he talked about the it's only syndrome, which I thought was pretty good. Like, it's only a 135-inch whitetail type that gets thrown around a lot. That's a great deer. A 135-inch deer is a great deer. And then again, even if it's not 135-inch, if the guy that shot it thinks it's a good deer, then it's a good deer. Who am I to tell him that it's not?
Yeah.
So hunting TV shows that only show big deer getting killed leads people to believe and be ashamed of shooting something so that they don't think would be on a YouTube show or whatever.
And I think it leads people to do things they shouldn't do. Like, it leads them to break the law. There's an outfitter, that big case up in Broken Bow here in Nebraska, where that outfitter was killing deer with silencers and taking too many deer because the drive to shoot the biggest deer took control of him, and, he wasn't thinking straight, obviously, when that got control of him, and it was just big deer, big deer, big deer. I got to shoot the biggest deer for TV. He was on TV shows as well. So it's like sometimes that can take control of you and lead to some bad things.
Yeah, and that's why we enjoy showing the process. Because to us, and like the author said, it should be more about the process. And if the end result is, because of that process, and the deer at the end is good to you, we've said it a billion times, then it's fine. It shouldn't be primarily about score, which is what he said and what we're saying. So
Yeah, and you kind of mentioned it, like, it's about the process. Like, why is it okay for a kid that's just starting hunting to shoot a spike, but because now he's 15 or 16 or 42, he can't do that? Because it made him, he said, because it made him happy. Well, it might make me happy to shoot a spike when I'm 42 when I was 8. So I think it's just, basically being happy with whatever it is you choose to take.
Yeah, and I thought it was good and refreshing to see that in that Bowhunter magazine article, there's a guy saying his opinion on trophy hunting and saying it shouldn't be the sole focus. And, you know,
with the
hunting
big buck
industry
on the
magazine,
front of the magazine.
I thought it was good to actually see that, and good on Bowhunter for putting that side in there. So it's the challenges and memories. Antler size is just a bonus, and I think should just be the extra bonus to it. But like I said, it was good to see that in Bowhunter magazine, so I commend them for doing that. So we'll do our top 3 segment now. So we're going to do our top 3 early season hunting tips. We might have the same ones. We usually have one that runs the same, and we'll just see what kind of comes out since we're getting into our September 1st opener here in just a few weeks. So my number 3 tip that I have for number 3, and this one I'm going to say is a work in progress. I want to see how it runs this year, but water. We found a spot that's just got a pond. It's the only water around, and Brody said it the other day, I think he said it best when we were out there checking the trail camera. This is the only water around. There's no ag, no pivots, no anything else for miles. So if there's any deer, instead of focusing on specific deer beds, we're just sitting on the one spot where we know they're all going to go.
Yeah.
They're going to get up and go. If they're in the area, if he's bedded close, he's going to go to that pond sometime. Hopefully before, it gets dark. But once he gets up from his bed, he's going to that pond.
Yeah, it's something we've talked about before and sometimes forget about ourselves, is what's the limiting resource? Is it food? Is it cover? Is it water? In this case, it's water. Like if you're on a river system in Iowa, when there's rivers everywhere, probably not the limiting resource. You can get water in a lot of places. But here, water is that limiting resource. And like you said, when they get up, if there's any deer in that area and it's 95 degrees out on September 1st, they're going to get up and they're going to get a drink of water.
Yeah, so that's, like I said, it's a work in progress, but I put it at number 3 because I'm beginning to see the value of water early season. And I know there's some guys that talk about water during the rut, which I need to do more research on, and we're going to use this one probably as an experiment to see how that works out too. So I think we could get some deer at 11, 12 o'clock, some bucks hitting that November 5th to get a drink as they're chasing does. So It's going to be interesting. So you're number 3.
My standing 3 is kind of the same thing, in a tactic and a work in progress, but standing corn, it's something that for the longest time I didn't think was important, and it was something deer ate but didn't really associate with cover or movement, and it's something that we've just been shown through all of our hunts how important standing corn is. This is Nebraska. It's different than probably Iowa where there's more tree cover, more mixed in, but standing corn is important for deer movement and for bedding. And I think that's something you can think about if you have properties. Don't overlook it, I think is maybe the point here.
Yeah, I'd be willing to bet in a place like Nebraska, if there's any trees or anything near a cornfield that you could drive by, and I'd place money on it that there's deer in that cornfield.
Yep.
Bet it in the cornfield, not in the trees, in the cornfield.
And that's something I did not believe for the longest time.
No.
But every time we're driving at night or something and we're like, see does on the side of the road, and one of us is like, hey, where's that coming from? Where's he going? Corn. Not the beans, the corn. So it's something that we've overlooked, and I think the point here is don't overlook it. Doesn't mean they're going to be there, but don't overlook it.
Yeah, that's one that we almost refused to accept, except we got showed it so many times repeatedly that it finally got through our skulls that standing corn is just as good as soybeans or trees.
Yep.
So do your number 2.
Being willing to move. So setups are going to change, especially for us. Our season opens September 1st. A lot's going to change from September 1st even to September 15th. Be willing to move. Don't be stuck in your spots.
Yeah, that's good. I think we move more now, obviously, with hang and hunt stuff than we ever used to, but we still get stuck staying in the same spot. We need to be willing to move. That's something we've, got better at as we've gone here. So, but like you said, definitely during the early season, as things change with them. For me, kind of a lesson learned is be more aggressive in the early season. I think that's one thing we want to do this year. We know where the bucks are. We've seen them. We've velvet scattered. We've got them on trail camera. We know they're coming through consistently. Why are we not getting in there and going after them?
Yep, and I think that's something where you're like, I've got all year. And then before you know it, it's October 15th, and you're like, this year is half over. And I've not done what I wanted to do up to this point. You start in September, and you're like, I got all year. But it goes by fast. Be aggressive, and we're definitely not aggressive enough.
Yeah, and that's, like I said, that's one of the lessons learned. That's one of the things I've learned from Zach, who you're good friends with. Obviously, you worked up there. But we're like, what? The other night, we were looking at those bucks, and we're like, so what would Zach do? And we'd be like, well, he'd be just right down there hunting them opening day. So, like, well, why not? Like, why would we sit in a tree somewhere where we know he's not walking
them
when we know he's down there? Like, just do what Zach does. So that
do
was
what Zach does.
So that was my number 2 one for just lesson learned was be more aggressive. So my number 1, I don't know if this is much of a tip. Now that I put it there, I shouldn't have put it there. But since it's on there and I don't have another number 1, I'm going to throw it up there. My number 1 tip, apparently, for early season is bring a thermocell.
Yeah, that's not a tip.
But that's what it is a tip because if there's mosquitoes. But I feel
being
like that's the number
maybe.
1. Sure. It makes you more comfortable. You're not moving around. You're not swatting mosquitoes. Bring a thermocell. They work great. That was my number 1.
That's definitely not a number 1.
So maybe that should move my number 2 up
3.
to number 1. I don't know.
Mine is if you find fresh sign, hunt it. The rubs are starting to kick on because the deer are losing their velvet. If they're making rubs because they're losing their velvet, that means they're there. If you find fresh sign, hunt it.
Yeah, and that's one thing, again, goes back to your one before, is moving around. If you see it, move to it. Like, there's no use seeing it and not doing something about it.
Yeah.
So if it's fresh sign, we did that a couple years ago where we weren't on the deer we wanted to early season. We weren't hardly seeing anything. Like, it took 3 weeks. We didn't see anything, which is hopefully different than what this year is going to be. But we did some in-season scouting. I found some fresh rubs that were just made, set up over the field, and there was bucks out there.
Yeah.
So it was just a moving to where that sign is, and sometimes that means doing a little in-season scouting. So your number 1's better than my number 1.
Yeah.
So now we'll move on now to our things we can learn from deer research. We've had a couple of these type of articles before. I think they always bring out some good conversation. This was a Realtree.com article from Mike Hanback, who most of you probably know. Just touched on different things than what we've talked about before, so I thought it was another good one to bring up. The first one was rubs, and I thought this one was super interesting. They did research on deer were in a high fence research pen. I don't know how many acres. It was decently sized high fence pen. They were removed for 3 years, and then different deer brought in from Michigan and a couple other states. They put them in that pen, and the bucks immediately began using the same exact rubs as the bucks from before.
That's crazy. Is it a smell thing? Did they say why? Maybe they say
I don't
why.
know that it really touched on why.
Is it a smell thing or a visual?
I don't
could
know.
they see where those rubs used to be? And like, hey, Billy thought this was a good tree. So do I, and make a rub on it, or what?
Yeah, I
or
don't
is
know
it the type
what.
of tree, or where the location?
Yeah, I just see
Probably a bunch
it
of
was
different
just
things.
super interesting that they use the exact same ones. Like they're using the same trails, making the same rubs in the same spot. So that just tells me, again, for rubs, if it's a traditional spot where you're seeing deer, and no significant factor has changed, it's probably going to be a good spot, hopefully year over year for you, if no big significant changes. But I just thought that was crazy that completely different deer. It wasn't the same deer they put back in 3 years later. Deer from Michigan, a completely different state, came back in and used the same trees. Completely ridiculous. So, again, rubs obviously used, and like we've talked about before, it's just what time of day is probably more important than, where the rub is important to getting that what time of day and where they're coming from. But I thought that was a really interesting thing that they found from deer research, that they went back to those exact same rubs. So, moving on to another type of deer sign here, we're talking about scrapes. And they, again, did another study, and it was 3-year-old and older bucks check scrapes the majority of the time between 2 and 3 a.m. from the study. So, I guess to me, we've talked about it a lot, but scrapes is all about location. To me, that just shows that they're a long ways away from where they're bedding. It's not saying don't hunt the scrapes. It's just saying you need to be closer to the scrape that's near bedding than you are this one.
Yeah, I'd agree. It's like, what scrapes were they? Were they monitoring the ones on the field edges or close to bedding? Like I said, I think it's a location thing. And it's always situational. You can set up on a scrape and it can be a complete dud, or you can set up on one that's next to bedding and there's deer coming past it all the time.
Yeah, and that begs the question, does scrape hunting work then, or is it better to back off? I think it works. Again, it's all about location of the scrape. Is it close to bedding, or is it over a field edge?
Yep.
So nothing too groundbreaking, with that research there. And we have another groundbreaking research one here, talking about rutting buck travel. Bucks move more in late October and November.
Thanks for telling us what we already knew.
That was a good one, so thanks for that one, but we got that one down.
I guess you have to prove something true just as much as you have to prove something not true, maybe?
Good point.
I think, you can't, we know it's true, but the science here is proving what we thought was true.
Yep.
So then now you can say it's true.
That got really confusing. There's a lot of trees in there. Moving on now, I guess. Number 4 is cover. This one's going to get a little technical. Not too much, though. Deer prefer cover, stick with me here, that hides 90% of their body from 200 feet or less. So basically, deer like thick stuff. They like most of their body
To be
being hid if you're within 200 feet of them. So, I mean, and we've seen this in our scouting, it's not, you get to the thicker stuff that's where the majority of the deer, the bucks, are going to bed. Because they can hide, but they can still see out type of a deal.
Yep, I would agree. Just from scouting, I'm sure everybody else has seen it too. You find those thick spots, and all of a sudden that deer just jumps out of this patch of really thick stuff. Like it's the thick stuff makes them feel secure, makes them feel safe.
Moving on to deer eyes and their vision, and what most of us already know, deer can detect really slight movement. So just underscores the importance of sitting still in your tree stand. I find myself that I probably don't sit still as much as I should.
No,
it's something
and even when I
know,
see a deer, I don't sit as still as I should.
I know I need to do a better, it needs to be a goal to not move as much because they can detect super slight movements. I mean, we've all probably seen it if you hunt at any length of time, but deer picking up on the slightest thing that you did, and you're like, how did he even see me? But they can obviously do that, and when they're standing there and they're looking at you, and they're bobbing their head, they say that's because they're trying to get a 3D view. Their depth perception isn't the same as ours. They can pick up movement better, but their depth perception isn't as good.
So it's trying to compute how far away you are and left and right.
That's why your camo works good, because it's giving them just a flat thing. They can't get that depth perception. So that's what they're trying to do, is they're getting that 3D image of you by moving their head around to different spots. Same thing like a duck or a goose does when it's coming into the decoy spread. They're moving their heads around. Same thing. They're trying to get a 3D view of the decoys and all that stuff that's going on. So I thought that's kind of cool. That's what they're doing when they're standing out there and she's just bobbing her head back around. Yeah, stomping, getting ready to blow and ruin everything. That's what they're doing. So we talked about this one in another deer research thing, but swamps, older deer are in the swamps. There's just another study that proved the same thing. So that's one we talked about in an earlier podcast, so you can definitely go back and listen to that if you want our thoughts and want to hear more about that study there. But that's just another basic one. Just threw it in there because I wanted to reprove the fact that swamps are good. And another obvious groundbreaking one, bucks go where the hunters aren't. I don't know the specifics of the study. It's just an obvious, takeaway from that one, that bucks go where hunters aren't. It's just good to bring back up some of that stuff. That way you think about it this year. If you sometimes some of that obvious stuff you forget, you need to go back to basics. So just kind of throwing that one in. But summer scrapes, this might be one you can talk about here in a little bit. Mature bucks make scrapes in the summer, often in their core area and near bedding. This was an actual research thing that they did, and that's something that we just literally saw a week ago.
Yeah, it's something we've seen and kind of took note of over the last few years, but finding scrapes that are active all year round, and it's what we saw on this property. We were scouting them with velvet scouting, going along the field edges, and all of these trees had branches hanging down. They were lacking leaves that they should have this time of year, and it's dry as I'll get out here in Nebraska right now, so all the dust in those fields was all torn up, and there's these little dusting we thought was turkeys, but it was deer making scrapes under the trees. And it proved true because the camera was right there, and every time those bucks went through there, they were stopping at those scrapes every single time.
Yep, and there was mulberry trees
those too,
with the overhanging branches, and there weren't any leaves on those branches. We're like, is that just no leaves growing from last year's scrapes or this year? Like I said, we got that truck came in. Great to see all the bucks on there, first of all. And then we're like, what the heck are they doing? They're touching those. They're not necessarily
browsing,
making a scrape as much as they're still checking it.
Yeah, who's here, who's been through, eat some of these leaves.
Yeah.
More of a more casual check than probably what you're getting in November. But it's still, I think it's still a social thing for them. It's still like, who's been through here since I was last through here. Yeah.
So that's just something that we wrote this down before we seen that, but the fact that we just seen it was just, crazy to see that was actually true, and something, just to take note of that I've really never seen or even thought about, but now I'd say it's 100% true.
Yep.
So, let's see. Got to move on. Oh, Dr. Grant Woods did a research study on that buck shift movement from summer to where maybe their core area is. We talked about this just a little bit on the other one that we did, but he said it's a 50-50 split on if a buck shifts his core area. So when they talk about deer completely moving or not being in there
in the summer because they won't be there.
Don't scout in the summer, or the buck's gonna leave. it's only 50-50 chance whether he's going to move or stay anyways.
Yeah. I mean, they say mature bucks move less. I don't know if somebody's proven that true, but they say mature bucks move less, which you can kind of expect. And I know there's been deer on public land that we've had for trail cameras that we've gotten summer pictures of, fall pictures of, and then found their sheds. You know, and that's not every buck we've seen, but that's a couple bucks we've seen. So they didn't move very far, but the other bucks, they might have moved. So like you said, 50-50, I think it's just a personality thing and pressure. If they don't feel pressure, there's no need to move if they've got everything they need.
Yeah, so why move if there's no pressure? So that's just something, I take 50-50 odds
on
a buck being there September 5th when I go in to hunt him. I mean, it seems pretty good to me. So we'll move on to hill country bedding. It's another Dr. Grant Woods one, but if you listen to anything that Dan Infalt puts out for hill country bedding, he always talks about that top third where the deer are going to bed. Grant did a study and proved the same thing. So that was just an observation that Dan had that tells you how smart he is just from seeing it. Grant did the research on it. Top third deer are going to bed there for hill country bedding. So again, something that most of us probably know, just good to see that the study and the science backs it up. Odor eliminating sprays. So this said that it significantly reduced odor levels of 29 compounds, but the smell was still there. So you can still get busted. So it reduces them, but it doesn't eliminate them.
Because you're still going to smell.
You're
in some way or
alive,
another.
even if you were dead in your tree stand, there's always a smell coming off of you, and as good as a deer can smell, it's going to smell you.
Yeah.
As you're sweating, like just living, you'd have to keep spraying continuously if you thought that would even do you any good.
Yeah, and I think it can help you. Will it maybe let the deer get closer so you can get a shot instead of him smelling you 20 yards out of range? Maybe. But he's also going to come in within 15 yards if my wind's not blowing to him. And I think that's the thing. I can set up all I want to, expecting the deer to come from this way and my wind not blowing to him, but he might show up behind me.
Yeah, so like I said, you can use them. I'm sure they help, but it's not going to eliminate. You still got to set up for what the actual wind is doing. It's not a replacement for being smart.
You can't just spray down and then sit wherever you want or walk wherever you want.
Yep. Number 12 here was a late December rut. Saying properties with way more does than bucks get an actual second rut. And it's like 28 days later than the actual rut in November. So that early middle part of December, if you have way more does or your public land's got way more does, however it works for you, there is a little bit of a second rut there in December when those other does that weren't bred come back into heat. So just something to think about. If you got some rut spots, might be worth throwing a sit in at one of your traditional rut spots. Maybe first part of December, see what happens there. But just a little research there on that one. Moving on now to stand pressure, which is important for us guys, especially that hunt public land. It said that bucks traveled 55 yards farther from stands at the end of the year compared to where they did on opening day. So that just proves the fact that bucks are aware of being hunted and adjust accordingly to it. So it's not going to give you, that's not groundbreaking research as far as, it doesn't tell you where the bucks go, but it's telling you to still be smart about your pressure and that they do notice it.
Yep.
So they sense that pressure. They don't completely disappear like everybody kind of thinks they do, or, not common knowledge, but a myth that's maybe out there is that people think the bucks completely move. They don't just completely run away to a different county. They just shift their pattern. It's just up to you to find that kind of shifting pattern. So take a quick little break here, let you know how you can support the Out Here Show and Whitetail Instinct for that matter. So if you want to support the show, you like what we're doing, you want to keep seeing it, go to our website, whitetailinstincts.com, and check out our apparel. We got a bunch of different shirts, sweatshirts. We're going to be adding more here as the fall goes on. So keep checking back. If you don't like any of the designs we have now, you got an idea, send us it. We might just make it. So we have, like I said, a bunch of shirts, sweatshirts over there. So head over there, whitetailinstincts.com. See if you can't find something you like, buy it, support the show. So with that, we'll wrap it up for this Out Here Show. A bunch of good stuff there, some trophy hunting stuff, some more deer research stuff that a lot of times is just good to rehash and just bring up. The more you think about it, the more you might think about it during deer season when you're struggling or need to get a fresh take on something. So I think some of that stuff is good to bring up.
Yep, you always kind of forget, like you said, some of those basic things, and then the science proves it here for what you're thinking, and it's just the basic things that maybe you overlook, you can refresh your brain on and maybe help you harvest something this fall.
Yeah, sometimes a new look is good. So like I said, with that, that'll wrap up the Out Here show every Monday, noon central. Also, with deer season approaching, go to our Whitetail Instinct YouTube channel. That's where you can find all the videos of our public land hunting here in Nebraska. We're going to be doing, hopefully, some traveling different parts of the state early in the year. We've got some really good prospects on camera. Early season should be exciting, hopefully, to start off the year. So we'd appreciate if you guys would go over there, watch the Whitetail Instinct stuff, and then just keep bouncing back and forth to both channels as we put out stuff. The content's going to be really ramping up as we get into deer season. So head over there. Make sure you like, subscribe to that as well as this channel. But thanks for watching. We'll be back here next Monday.